everyone, and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is going to be all about the latest summon showcase. It's another Gala remix, this time round bringing back Gala Mym and Gala Mars at an appearance rate up. This showcase is all about the flame element, and it also features a brand new 5-star permanent pool flame adventurer. We've known since this month in Dragalia Lost at the start of March that we'd be having a character from the main campaign join our rosters as a playable adventurer around the middle of this month, and it turns out to be quite the surprise. This is a character I was not expecting to get a playable alt, at least in this form, because it's none other than Sheila as a brand new flame dagger. And based on everything that was happening in the story, in the main campaign, I fully expected her to make her appearance as a Gala alt sometime down the road. I did not think whatsoever that she was going to be part of the permanent summoning pool, but it turns out that's the case, and she's available much more quickly than I expected. So this is maybe going to be a tough decision if you're a Sheila fan, but outside of that, and in particular if you already have Mym and Mars, I think that this is going to be a safe skip. Sheila looks good. Mym has definitely proven her use over many years at this point, and Gala Mars likewise is a strong dragon, but I think the biggest knock against the showcase is that it comes in the half anniversary month, and we know that at the end of this month we're probably going to get some pretty exciting opportunities to summon a Gala character that is likely quite powerful, and maybe some opportunities to get past Gala Adventures and Dragons as well. So my recommendation on this one is going to be to go ahead and save your resources and skip. The secondary reason is everything here is really focused on the flame element. And compared to some of the other elements, well, flame, we already have the full slate of current endgame content available and released. We have Primal Midgard Stormer. We have Legend difficulty of the Sinister Dominion for Yaldabaoth and Asura. And we also have Legend difficulty in the Agito of Volk. And so for that reason, when it comes to the flame element, it's less about speculation on future content. It's hard to really wonder if some of these summons are going to be useful down the road because we kind of know the content that's out there, and we already realize that a lot of existing characters can take it on successfully. So I think when we talk about water, when we talk about light, wind, and shadow, we can at least, put forward the idea that, hey, these will probably be good now, but maybe their real use is going to be when we get Primal Zodiarch, let's say, which will be several months from now. So I think when it comes to Flame Adventures, the bar is a little bit higher, and especially since the content for Flame Adventures has been out for a while, you will already know whether you're able to clear it yourself or not. It's less speculation about the future. And so with that, I think that Flame is pretty deep for current endgame content. You have Gala Leonidas, you have Ayaha and the Toha, Summer Alex, Summer Mitsuhide, there's Kimono Elisan. There are a lot of adventurers who can perform well even in a Curse of Nihility environment. Gala Laxi is another one, Gala Gatov. Now granted, a lot of them are limited to Gala showcases or sometimes seasonal, like Dragoniel Ilya is another one I can think of, but there's quite a variety of good flame adventures to the point that you probably at least have a handful of them in your collection at this point. If you don't, then maybe you want to consider summoning here, but even so, I think that while Gala Mym is awesome, her best use isn't necessarily against Sinister Dominion and Primal Dragon bosses where that Curse of Nihility is a factor. Her best use is really against raid bosses or pre-Curse of Nihility content where she can take advantage of her Dragon's Claws ability. So ultimately, I think that we kind of know the lay of the land where you want to use Flame Adventures, and probably Sheila and Gala Mym, as well as Gala Mars, will be effective for you in that content. Even in Nihility scenarios, Mym is still going to be pretty good, but they're also maybe not necessary to get the job done. And so that's kind of my take on this showcase. you want to save for the half anniversary already, and then it's an element that doesn't necessarily need that much more support to handle current quests. So ultimately, I'm going to be skipping on this one. Part of the reason for that is also very limited resources on my part, of course. But if you are a huge Sheila fan or Mym fan and you just haven't gotten them, of course you haven't gotten Sheila, but if you just haven't gotten Mym and really want to, you could. But I do think that there's a chance with the half anniversary that we maybe get some kind of Platinum Deluxe for past Gala adventures, or something that's also going to let you target past Gala adventures or even dragons a little bit more easily. So we'll see whether that comes to pass. But for me, with this being such a short showcase, it's definitely going to be a skip this time around. And it saddens me to say that, because I do think that Sheila's new Auspex fit is pretty cool. Having said that, we are still going to spend the rest of the video going through the kits of Sheila. We'll talk a little bit about Gala Mym, especially in light of her mana spiral that wasn't too far back. And then also we'll talk a little bit about Gala Mars. So let's go ahead and kick things off here with a conversation around Sheila. So she says, "I'll accept all of the consequences of my actions and choose with my own heart." I do like the outfit. And she's a Flame Dagger attack unit. I guess attack unit can be relevant now after the release of Elysium. Of course, Elysium being in the light element, but this is a factor that actually can be referenced now when we hadn't really seen it referenced at all in the past. Adventure details. After regaining her heart, Sheila has awakened as an Auspex. Though her soul was imprisoned by black mana for an age, her bond with her father brought it back. She then donned an Auspex's garb and set out on a new path. So, certainly would be fun to run her with Gatov just because of their connection. Her skills are Carmine Rush and Flame Raid. Then she has the critical rate co-ability, which is standard on daggers, this interesting amp equals shapeshift prep 5 chain co-ability, and some longer abilities here, the Way of the Blaze Wolf 2, of course Gatov is also known as the Blaze Wolf, Unyielding Spirit 2, which is going to be dual resistance to stun and sleep, and Royal Steel 2, which is again a longer ability that deals with her unique play pattern. So let's start off with her skills. Carmine Rush deals damage to enemies in a line, lowers their flame resistance, and applies Evil's Bane to them. If the skill is used directly after the user's second skill, a variant called Bright Carmine Rush is used instead. That deals damage to enemies in the line, lowers their flame resistance, and applies Evil's Bane to them. Also, if the user has the Blaze Wolf's Rush effect, this consumes it and immediately readies the user's second skill for use. Okay, so either way, it's going to deal damage. It's going to give you 30 seconds of flame res down at 15%, which is pretty nice. Now, that can be a little weaker than it looks when you consider that you already have things like the Gozu Tenno debuff, or you might already have Gala Reborn Agni that increases your damage in the flame advantage bracket. So that may not be as good as it looks, but it's still pretty good, and depending on your team composition, you may not have those other things present, especially lasting 30 seconds. Even though it doesn't stack, this skill has low enough cooldown that you should be able to keep this up pretty reliably on the enemy. And if you use the regular variant of the skill, you get Evil's Bane for 15 seconds, but if you use the souped up one, you get it for 30 seconds. And if you have Blaze Wolf's Rush, you consume it, and then you get your second skill immediately available for use if you use this directly after the user's second skill and have that variant. So it kind of reminds me of like a skill chains type playstyle, or maybe like Gatov's playstyle when he has his dual swords, where you can kind of combo off between the two skills. Let's go ahead and read the second one here. So Flame Raid, this one's shareable with a share cost of 5. Deals damage to surrounding enemies, dispels one buff from each target, and inflicts burn. If this skill is used directly after the user's initial skill displayed at the top of their skill list, a variant called Savage Flame Raid will be used instead. Savage Flame Raid deals damage to surrounding enemies, dispels one buff from each target, and inflicts Scorch Rend. Also, if the user has the Blaze Wolf's Rush effect, Savage Flame Raid consumes it and immediately readies the user's initial skill for use. Yeah, so it does remind me a lot of how Gatov works. So this time around, you're getting Dispel, damage to surrounding enemies, and either Burn or you're getting Scorch Rend if it's souped up. and you also get enhanced damage when it's powered up. This spell is good. Burn and Scorchwind are both useful. Against Primal Midgard Stormer, you can inflict him with both, so it is helpful to have both of those afflictions on Primal Midgard Stormer to increase your damage through Punisher Worm Prince. Outside of that, the Dispel can come in handy. Primal Midgard Stormer stacks up defense buffs on himself at the Master difficulty. That's something you're going to want to take care of to be able to deal increased damage. I think the question here, though, when it comes to like Sinister Dominion content, is really more about, how is the AoE on these skills really going to be? This one says it deals damage in a line, and this one says it deals damage to surrounding enemies. Is that in a small radius? Is that like a Gala Mascula type of skill where it's like surrounding enemies on screen, or like a Gala Cleo type, Ancient Ray? So I think that's a question mark for both Yaldabaoth and Asura. For Yaldabaoth, because you need to deal with all of the summons that Yaldabaoth puts forward, and for Asura, more from a perspective of dealing enough damage to avoid timing out. You're going to want to be consistently destroying orbs, melee orbs, and ranged orbs, although Sheila will mostly destroy the melee orbs for the legend difficulty to increase the damage that you deal. So the parameters of what's needed for these different fights are quite different nowadays, and I think that AoE is a big one that's really hard to just assess on paper without actually seeing how the characters perform. So that would be one consideration I would have here. The Dispel is going to come in handy in some form or fashion in all three of those fights. There are at least some buffs that will get stacked upon the boss, but and so will the Burn and Scorchwind will be handy to increase your damage output. But that AoE component is sort of the missing ingredient that would make her really good against the Sinister Dominion, not as necessary whatsoever for Primal Midgard Stormer, of course. So let's continue reading on. So her co-ability is critical rate plus 10%, and that's pretty standard, but nice to have. The chain co-ability here is interesting. Amp equals Shapeshift Prep 5. If a team member is attuned to Flame, fills 3% of the Dragon Gauge when they are granted an Amp or Team Amp. After activating, the ability will not activate again for 10 seconds. Benefits your whole team. So we've seen a similar Shapeshift Prep ability, but it's always been tied to combos before. So we've seen that on Kimono Knot, Gala Knot, Gala Leonidas. It's a pretty common chain co ability at this point. Maybe I should restate that. It's a powerful chain co ability. It's not like all that common that you see it on everyday adventures, but it's a popular draw. It's common in good team comps. It's one that you can reliably execute upon, and outside of content like Yaldabaoth, which punishes shapeshifting and makes it so you can't do it all the time. And when I say punish, I just mean, he takes away the shapeshifting gauge. Your shapeshift-centric strategies just don't work as well there because when you have Twisted Blessing on you, you can't do it. Outside of that, being able to ramp out a lot of dragon transformations can be quite good. So I know for me, that's one of the things I find most effective against Asura on the Legend difficulty, is getting a lot of shapeshifts because the dragons I can shapeshift into have nice AoE properties, are able to handle those orbs. In particular, the combined form of Ayaha and the Toha is really good at dealing with all the orbs on screen at once, and having an engine to get a lot of Dragon Gauge is a good way to make it so that I'm shapeshifting all the time. So I think that there's some good merit to this for sure. But amps are not necessarily as easy to just pull off as combos, so you're going to have to be a little bit more thoughtful on who's in your team and what kinds of amps are they contributing, and how frequently are you going to be able to really spam those. You do have the 10-second cooldown here. One of the good things, as we'll read on, is that Sheila does have amps in her kit, and it's not one of the most common kinds of amps either. She has a critical damage amp for one of them. So that's something that you're adding an amp on a different axis, I guess, than the rest of your team might be doing. So that's going to help as far as just having a variety of types of buffs while still being able to get some advantage out of this chain code ability. I think it's an interesting one. But I think that the combo one is a little bit more degenerate. It just pairs so well with like rapid fire style mancasters or even dagger adventures, bow adventures. There are a lot of adventures you can keep a high combo count. But let's continue reading on now to her abilities. So the Way of the Blaze Wolf 2 is her first one. This adds 20% to the modifier applied to critical damage against enemies that have the Evil's Bane effect. Aha, so that's what Evil's Bane does. And in addition, the user's second skill will deal critical damage to enemies with Evil's Bane. Interesting, so kind of a guaranteed critical. Something I think we've seen on like Young Ronzel in the past. It mentions here the critical hit will reset the user's inspiration level if the user's inspired. That just seems like a safety valve to make it so that you can't, well, I guess it doesn't really matter too much. Inspiration's not really that much of a thing in the flame element, but inspiration makes it so your next hit is a guaranteed critical hit. Since that already is doing a guaranteed critical hit, I guess it just takes away your inspiration level. I'm not sure if they really needed to mention that, but maybe there's some use case I'm not thinking of. Also, swiping to dodge during a standard attack will deal damage to surrounding enemies. Performing a standard attack during this unique dodge will then resume the user's standard attack combo from their most recent attack. Dodging again immediately after the user's unique dodge will instead result in a standard dodge. So we've seen this increasingly. I guess this might be the same text that we see on like Gala Zethia, but there are other adventurers that can do this kind of combo out of dash. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a lot of characters that have at least played in a similar space. Halloween Silas kind of played in a similar space, but had the samples for dashes, basic combos, and force strikes. This is usually pretty good, but I don't know exactly how good the special combos of Sheila will be. But I do know, as we'll read on, there is a payoff for completing a full sequence of combos, much like there's that payoff for Gala Zethia. So being able to dodge while not disrupting your full sequence of standard attacks is going to be beneficial. Additionally, when using the user's first or second skills, for the duration of the attack, the user will be immune to knockback and damage taken will be reduced by 50%. Also pretty nice. This kind of reminds me of Gatov and then a little bit of Gala Zethia again. I wonder if they're maybe trying to make this seem like an Auspex type of thing, is immunity to knockback and reducing damage taken. But it does remind me of how I think her first skill works that way. Finally, increases standard movement speed by 35%. Whoa! This increase does not affect movement speed while sprinting or while shapeshifted. That's kind of interesting and just kind of wild to me. I don't know exactly what the point of that is. Maybe it's just like mobility on the battlefield. Sometimes when you're dealing with a situation where you're locked on to a lot of different enemies, it does slow you down. And if you don't know this, when you're locked on to an enemy, your movement speed is reduced until you break away from them, and your AI teammates target that enemy until you break away from them. And this can be difficult to manage in fights like Yaldabaoth, where there's so many summons that you're constantly locked onto something. And I guess to a lesser extent in Asura too, you can accidentally get locked onto the wrong thing. Maybe having extra movement speed can kind of help with that. You know, maybe it'll make your Kaleido runs faster or something. I've always still found it funny, like the Fafnir Hustle ability that makes your movement speed faster in Kaleido. I still don't really know the purpose. I don't really understand who would want to use that. Is Sheila like going to be the speedrun character where you just skip everything and, you know, go to the boss fight and hope that you can win? Maybe. Who knows? Because that's such a peculiar little bonus, but I guess it might be useful. I'm trying to even think of when this would be useful. Maybe when you're trying to dodge like some of the scripted attacks in Primal Midgardsormr, just having that extra movement speed helps you. But honestly, like, I feel because I'm used to the normal movement speed, and 35% probably isn't going to feel like that big a difference in practice, but I might just like end up bumping into some of the gales and tornadoes that Midgardsormr summons because I'm used to moving at a certain pace if I were controlling Sheila in play. But that's an interesting one. I don't really know what to make of that yet. Alright, so then she has her dual resistances, which is great. You're seeing this more often on permanent pull adventurers, and it's good to see. It's helpful, especially considering nowadays, if you really want to, you can patch up a lot of things with Wormprint slots and all the different types of affinities that are available. But it's nice when this is built in. It means you can kind of build out irrespective of those of those affliction resistances. And then Royal Steel 2, her final ability, the 4th attack in the user's standard attack combo grants them a critical damage amp with a maximum team amp level of 1, and the 7th attack grants them the Blaze Wolf's Rush effect. Blaze Wolf's Rush does not stack, so you're only going to be able to toggle between your 2 skills so much here, with this not really stacking. But this is the source of building up amps, and of course the critical damage amp going to be nice on that 2nd skill, with it being a guaranteed critical hit if the enemy is affected by Evil's Bane. Also, using the user's initial skill, displayed at the top of their skill list, grants them a defense amp, nice, with a maximum team amp level of 1. So, critical damage amp and defense amp both covered here. If you can add a teammate that increases your maximum team amp level, that could also be beneficial here for sure. Notably, strength amp not present, but I would say that's the most common amp. Off the top of my head, I can't think in the flame element which is necessarily the most common, but strength amp overall is probably the most common type of amp. Alright, so I think that Sheila looks pretty good. You know, both afflictions, Dispel, are beneficial for sure. The amps are going to really help against Curse of Nihility with your damage output and probably with your speed of being able to clear Curse of Nihility content. But some of that content, like the Legend Sinister Dominion, a lot of it comes down to your AoEs that you have as well. And so that would be where I want to see what Sheila is really capable of before calling her a sure success, but she certainly looks pretty good here. I think that it's just, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we already know the endgame content with win bosses, where you use Flame Adventurers, and there are a variety of characters who can take that on, and so I don't know if Sheila really does anything to change the game up there too much. Alright, I think that's pretty much all I have to say on Sheila. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about Gala Mym and then Gala Mars. So, Gala Mym, one thing I want to point out here is her kit is pasted in as though she doesn't have a mana spiral, or at level 80. And so it's going to be worth reading through and just pointing out what she got with her mana spiral. But if you're not too familiar with Gala Mym at all, one of the things that makes her super strong, she has a great dragon form and an ability that rewards transformation by increasing her attack rate permanently after the 2nd time she shapeshifts, and increasing her strength permanently after the 1st time that she shapeshifts. She also has extra dragon time, so she's going to stay in her dragon form longer. And then this Chaincoat ability, which applies to your whole team technically, but really just applies to whoever's shapeshifting, up to 3 times per quest, it's going to give you a visible strength buff, and a sizable one at that. The only thing about this is it doesn't work under Curse of Nihility, so it's great in raid settings where you usually get a lot of transformations off. It's good against like the Morsayati boss, that's available permanently. It's good in a lot of older content too, like the High Dragons, the Agito bosses. You can quickly decimate an enemy just by spamming shapeshifts, so I think that that's quite strong. Against Curse of Nihility, it's not as great, but Mym has still found some good uses there. You know, one of them is her Dragon's Claw skill, which hits in a wide area, does good damage. It's also shareable with the cost of 4, so oftentimes, if you're running like an overdamage shared skill, this can be a good complement to that as your secondary shared skill, because it's going to fit in there with your cost of 10 on most adventurers, and hit in a wide area, boost your dragon gauge, and also increase the user's strength. I don't think that buff's going to work under Curse of Nihility. But the thing to note about this one is that with the change to Mym with her mana spiral, this also is going to dispel as well. So that's a nice little addition to it too, that makes it really nice skill with dispel and the dragon gauge increase. Pretty solid. Her second skill is going to do more damage with her mana spiral. The first one I think is going to do more damage also. The second skill is also now going to cause burn with her mana spiral, so that's kind of an upgrade. As far as her abilities go, this first ability reduces susceptibility to burn, or increases resistance to burning by 100%. With the mana spiral, it's getting that potent burn res effect, which means that if she would get burned, she instead gets a strength buff. The other thing that the Mana Spiral does is make it so that whenever she would use a skill, you're going to get a strength amp with the maximum team amp level of 3. So that's pretty good. That gives her some play in Curse of Nihility content where those amps are helpful. One of the other things her Mana Spiral does is make it so her Flame Wyrm's Defiance 2, instead of just increasing stun res by 100%, you get also sleep res 100%. So you get true dual resistances. And then if you would be stunned or put to sleep, instead, your Dragonclaw skill gauge fills by 50%. That's a pretty nice bonus there. It's one that I feel like I always forget about. I never really think to intentionally get hit as Mym, but there are times when that can really help you out, and by getting your Dragonclaw skill gauge filled up, it's going to mean that you're able to more rapidly transform and shapeshift and take advantage of Mym's high damage in her dragon form. Also, this makes it so that they're potent resistances too when you get the Mana Spiral, so you also get a strength buff if you get hit by a move that would cause stun or sleep. And then finally, the last thing her Mana Spiral does is it gives her Dragon Time 25% instead of 20%. Mym was already such a powerful adventurer that I don't think she really needed a whole lot more to push her over the top, but adding Burn, adding Dispel, adding a little bit of an amp opportunity and the dual resistances, I feel like she got a pretty good upgrade, all things considered. So I think she's certainly still a very usable adventurer, even in Nihility-based content. You're not going to be able to take advantage as much because you're not getting the Dragon's Claws, but I believe you still should get these unique bonuses from Flame Wyrm's Nature 2, which increase your attack rate while shapeshifted and increase your strength for the remainder of the quest and power up Flames of Passion. I believe those still should work. So although I haven't used her myself personally very much in Primal Midgard Stormer, or Yaldabaoth or Asura, I think that she's probably pretty good. I think she can probably still carry her weight in that content. Alright, so that's all I have to say about Gala Mym. Now let's talk a little bit about Gala Mars. Gala Mars is a dragon that really changed the game upon his release, and actually in conjunction with Mym can create a dragon battery strategy. A few other characters can do this too. That is very effective. So what makes Gala Mars so special is really this ending shapeshift equals skill gauges 100%. When you end your shapeshift with Gala Mars, all of your skills are completely filled on that character, including shared skills. If any of those skills, like Mym's first skill, boost the dragon gauge, oftentimes, especially if some of your shared skills do it too, oftentimes you can use all your skills immediately, and by the time you finish using them, your dragon gauge is already halfway full again. You're able to transform, and then when you get out of Mars, your skills are refilled, you spam them off again, and it creates a virtuous cycle that's very powerful. And this skill gauge still works in Nihility settings as well. But there are some other limiter mechanics that may make it, not quite as good. So Yaldabaoth comes to mind with that Twisted Blessing on Legend difficulty, which for lots of the quest prevents you from shapeshifting. And so that is kind of a way that restricts or limits what Mars can really do explosively there. And not only that, but you're not able to take advantage of Dragon's Claws or Dragon's skills against Curse of Nihility. So one of the ways that this was so effective is you have characters like Mym and others, especially with Wyrmprince attached, that scale really well off of multiple shapeshifts. Besides that, Mars does have Strength 5 and HP 50% equals Strength plus 20%. So Strength 5 means he's just getting a flat 70% strength, which is solid. And then you get an extra 20% when HP is above 50%, so you get 90% total, which nowadays with 5th Unbinds and all these reborn dragons and so on, it's maybe not what it used to be, but it's still 90% strength most of the time, which is very, very good. It's just we have more options now. But I do think that, one thing to really point out here about Mars is you just need one copy. You need one max unbound copy for any kind of dragon strategies you want to do, because in general, you can't shapeshift with multiple characters in solo play And so having one Mars is going to be enough. You really don't need to pick up extra Mars or anything like that for your backline, because the true power here comes from when you actually shapeshift into him. His skill is Alchemical Hellfire. It deals damage to enemies directly ahead, draws them to the user, and increases the user's strength. It is possible to charge the skill gauge by attacking and use it up to twice during one shapeshift. Being able to use it twice is nice for that burst damage and just to deal with like a lot of enemies in Yaldabaoth or the summoning portals for enemies there. It can be useful in Asura to deal with some of the orbs, but you can't usually position them super well to hit both of them. But certainly having both uses is nice. Where this is by far the best though is in earlier content without that nihility limitation on buffs. In earlier content, you're getting that solid plus 20% strength twice, because you get to use this twice in one shapeshift, which is just an excellent way to set up yourself for break. You could use it on like your Ezolith, for example, before you go into break. Then when you undo your shapeshift, all your skills are ready. You're going to deal a lot of damage to the enemy along with having a really high buff. But that doesn't work as well nowadays with like Primal Midgard-Zormr or Sinister Dominion. So that was a strategy that was very effective back in the day. Now I feel like this skill is more average, but being able to use it twice, it still definitely comes in handy. So that is pretty much my take on this showcase. I think Gala Mars and Mym hold up quite well, and I think Sheila looks good, but the question is, do you really need to power up your flame teams at this point in time? I feel like it's more likely that we're going to want to save our resources to summon for things that are going to help us on Primal Brunhilde's trial, which is releasing this month, or for Legend Surtur, which should be releasing in the future, or for the other Primal Great Worm trials, rather than the ones that we already have released, like Midgard-Zormr's and the Legend Sinister Dominion that have wind element enemies where you use flame element adventures. So that's my take on this showcase, everyone. Let me know if you still plan on summoning it, and hopefully you do get Sheila, Mym, or Mars, whoever you're going for, if that's the case. That is going to do it for today, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.